And that allows me to let some of the frustrations go because I know that I'm simply not putting in enough time and effort to earn that frustration. Hi, welcome back to The Next Act. I'm your host, Keaton Hall. If you're listening to this, I'm in a hotel room. If you're watching this, you can clearly see that I'm not in my normal place of recording. If you're listening and want to watch, head on over to YouTube, head on over to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at The Next Act Pod. You can see some short form content. We got minute long or less videos on all those social platforms, so it's not an hour and a half long and a lot more consumable during your normal day. So go on over and subscribe, follow, if you feel led. If you don't feel led, then that's okay too. I appreciate you listening right now. This episode is unofficially brought to you by New Car Smell. Even if it's not new, it's new to you, and that's all that matters. On a more serious note, this episode marks the start of a series that I'm calling Biggest Adjustments. I have no idea how many episodes will be in the series because there are so many adjustments that others and I have to make after their first act and will continue to learn and make, and hopefully others will be able to relate to as well. One of the first adjustments that I had to make and that I experienced after my first act was having to adjust the physical expectations I had for myself. When you play sport from the time you could hold a ball all the way through your 5th year of college like I did, you become used to a few things. You become used to a higher level of performance in your sport and expect to meet those standards whenever you do play. And you have expectations for what your body not only can do, but should be able to do whenever you go out to lift or run or do anything athletic like that. After you get done playing, one of the most frustrating things is when you're not performing like you used to. The things that felt easy back then are feeling a lot harder when you're not putting all that time and energy toward them. The story of my adjustment period, along with a lot of other athletes that graduated or retired around the same time, is a bit unique. So let's go back to the spring of 2020, if you will. The whole world shuts down, right? And so I went from a lifestyle of a college basketball player to not having any gyms open and having at-home workouts. So it's a large adjustment period there. So here's how I figured out what that not only felt like, but also what it looked like when I had to adjust. First adjustment, being accustomed to a higher level of performance in your sport and expecting to meet that standard every time you play. For me, that was basketball. From years in high school, NCAA, pickup, and intramural games, I had developed a style of play that I was able to maintain because of the amount of work I had put in and the amount of time I had dedicated toward my craft. I was used to my shot being automatic because of the anywhere between 250 and over 1,000 shots I would get a day depending on what I had. I was used to my handles being tight from years and years of drills and other work put in there. I was used to my cuts being quick and sharp. I was used to my speed being fast, and I was used to my jumps being high. Well, relatively high at least. After I was done, it was probably a couple of months between my last game and when I played a game that was more than just messing around. Between that time, I had no gyms open in Michigan. I was shooting sometimes here and there in my driveway, but most of my time was spent towards studying for CPA exams. So clearly a large shift in the amount of time I not only could, but was putting toward basketball and lifting and stuff like that. When I did go play pickup, the shot was still good, but it wasn't where I was used to it being. My handles were still solid, but I would lose the ball here and there a little bit more. I felt half a step slow, and then my jumps weren't feeling quite as high. Some days were good, but other days were just straight up bad. So there was a level of frustration that naturally came with that. At first, I wasn't sure why it was getting to me so much. And then I had to make an adjustment, and I realized that there was a reason I was able to reach and maintain that level of performance that I'd become so used to over the years. And it was because as a college basketball player, the only reason I got there was because of the crazy amount of dedication and effort I had put toward that craft. In my new phase of life, I wasn't going to be putting all that time and effort into basketball like I was. not only because I didn't have time for it, but also because I simply didn't want to in this new phase of life. The biggest adjustment here that I had to make was reevaluating the expectations I had for myself whenever I would go play pickup or whenever I would be in a men's league game. The expectations I had for myself are still really high. The muscle memory is still all there, but the expectations for overall performance are lowered a bit because I realize I'm not putting in all that time and effort that I was at the college level, and that allows me to let some of the frustrations go because I know that I'm simply not putting in enough time and effort to earn that frustration, as the OG Michael Lancaster would say. I'm in this phase of life, I'm not earning those frustrations, and that's okay. The second adjustment I had to make was the expectation of what my body should be able to do and would do in workouts after I retired. As an athlete, I was used to pushing my body to a point where it felt like I couldn't breathe, and then being able to recover within a few minutes and do it all over again. I had pushed my body's conditioning to the way it needed to be able to perform at a college level like I was. To give a little bit of background with the lifting aspect of things, I started lifting when I was in high school. It was a combination of programs that I had bought, some CrossFit classes here and there, and then I met Abdullah. Abdullah showed me how to do a lot of things, from the proper form of lifts and the different types of workouts that he would put us through. The biggest thing he taught me, though, was pushing past any limits physically or mentally that I either thought I had or was subconsciously imposing on myself. He would consistently push me past those self-perceived limits and show me where I actually was and what my body actually was capable of doing. This expanded my expectation of what I could do and what I should be able to do in any given workout. The expectation became to throw heavy weight around, and for my muscles not to fatigue, and if they did, to be able to push past that fatigue because of all the limits I had broken with him and all of the expectations I had because I was removing those limiting beliefs. After I retired, after everything shut down, during this transition period and having to adjust expectations, for a lot of people, strength is a use it or lose it type of thing. And in 2020, when the lockdowns happened and the at-home workouts, or if you had an at-home gym, you had that. But for most of us, they became body weight or very limited and not what we were used to, especially as athletes. And that use it or lose it proved to be true, unfortunately. While I was at home, I had a set of dumbbells and a bench that I had from, I want to say, my 13th birthday in our basement, and the consistency was still there. I mean, still would go lift down there most days of the week because, I mean, you had loads of time on your hand, but the frequency and the intensity obviously dropped because I didn't have just hundreds of pounds of weight and plates and all the other things I was used to in a gym that with all the workouts that we had been doing as college athletes. So this happened and continued to happen during the summer of 2020, obviously, until gyms started to slowly open back up. And when I did get to go back to a normal gym and get back to the lifts and all the heavier weight that I had been doing in college, the first times back were a bit rough, to say the least. And the expectations I had were completely way above where they should have been. But it was something that, as an athlete, I'd become so accustomed to and just thought it would come right back. No, not a lot of rust, and I was very mistaken. There was obviously a lot of certain standards that I did not meet at first because my body had to get back to used to it. But realizing that was just so tough because you go from being able to do all these things and now you're back to it and you're not able to do it, at least at first. And that's always a tough thing to kind of try and swallow when you come across it. Now, on the cardio side of things, I had some speed expectations from two different types of workouts that I'll go into right now. The first was treadmill workouts. During my 4th year there at Manchester, I knew a soccer player. His name was Nick, and he was one of the fastest guys I'd ever seen in my life. And whether that's an exaggeration or not, because we were at a college and he was one of the fastest guys there, that's neither here nor there. but he was fast, and I knew that I wanted to get faster. So in the spring of 2019, he would put me through treadmill workouts, sprint workouts, about 2 to 3 times a week. It started off doing between 8 and 10 sets of 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off on the treadmill. Then we would go to 45 seconds on and 45 seconds off. Then we would move it up to 60 seconds on, 90 seconds off. And these are all sprints. And we would do 8 to 10 sets of those. And so that speed expectation got built up. And then track was the other area that I'd built up a speed expectation for. During my first 3 years, our preseason conditioning consisted a lot of track workouts. We'd go out to the track, we'd run miles of just sprints. It'd be 800s, 400s, 200s, 100s, and they would all have a time cap you had to meet it in. You had to run it in, or else you would do it over until you did get it. It obviously sucked, but by the time season got there, we were able to move. The one year, we ran a mile in 5 minutes and 25 seconds as guards, and that was the final test of conditioning. Now, whether or not it was effective or not, it's not really the point. The point is, we had this expectation for how we were able to run on a track. After I retired, the cardio aspect is really an area where you use it or lose it. And I feel like that, at least for me, I feel like that goes away a lot quicker than the strength aspect does. So the first treadmill and track workouts back, I was gassed, absolutely gassed. And with the treadmill workouts, we'd been doing 8 to 10 sets of 30 seconds and all those different timed those sprints. And the first treadmill workout back I was barely able to get 4 or 6 sets of the 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. The shortest amount of time for those treadmill workouts that I had become so accustomed to, I was only able to get like half of the reps we were doing. And same thing with the track. We would be doing miles of those sprints. And then the first time back at a track, I was barely able to get 3 or 4 under the amount of time that I was hitting those inconsistently. The expectation adjustment with strength and conditioning is a little bit more tough than the ones with your sport because there are more objective and quantitative standards and thresholds that you know you're not meeting. As opposed to basketball, for me, a lot of that expectation was just off of my subjective judgment of how I was doing. But with strength and conditioning, there are numbers that you are either meeting or you're not. And it's very black and white. So when you are not meeting those numbers that you were meeting so consistently and had become accustomed to meeting, it sucks. It sucks not being able to do what you used to do. As I've gotten further into retired life, I realized that the physical performance of my body had become a large source of confidence and self-esteem for me. Now, let me expand on that a little bit. There were a few different areas in my life that I drew a lot of confidence from, and sports was definitely one of those areas. With basketball, I realized it was something that I loved, and it was something that I could be good at. I got hooked on the cycle of putting in work and seeing the results pay off. Every time I would go get a workout in on my own or have dad come rebound for me or go to a practice or see results in the game, the cycle just got more and more developed, and naturally, as I continued to get better at that, it was something that I developed a lot of confidence from. Same thing with the physical aspect of training. I was never the fastest kid. I was never the one that could jump the highest, but I was one of the stronger kids. And when I started to take training more seriously as I got older, I got addicted to feeling and seeing not only the improvements in strength and athleticism, but also testing and seeing how far I could push the limits of my own body. Being one of, if not the strongest guy on my team, was always something that I had a goal of on any basketball team I played on. And having the strength that I did as a basketball player in a sport where there's not a ton of like huge jacked guys also became a huge source of confidence and self-esteem for me. Needless to say, being someone who performed and played at a certain level became a large part of how I viewed myself and how I viewed my success. But I didn't realize how much I did until I retired. For me, not being at those levels of performance that I was used to was really frustrating at first because I knew what it felt like. Whether it was something really noticeable like being able to bench 275 or something that people wouldn't notice like how my legs would feel when I was stepping and walking around whenever my legs were strong and feeling bouncy. I had worked so hard to get to that point, and it definitely became somewhat of a badge of honor for myself, knowing that it was something that I was known for. So that's why when the performance went down, for me, the confidence and self esteem took a little bit of a hit too. Don't hear me the wrong way. I fully advocate for working on your confidence through working on your body because I enjoy and experience the benefits both physically and even more so mentally. I'm saying that having the performance of your first act be your sole source of your confidence is a dangerous thing because that performance is volatile and has a shelf life. I was able to navigate this adjustment of expectations because my confidence is based in things that are lasting and sustainable. A couple examples of that would be faith in a God that does not change, and never has, and never will, and confidence from habits that are based out of principle that have stood the test of time. The things that I ground my confidence in are things that do not change depending on circumstances and don't rely on my feelings to work. And that's been one of the biggest things that I've found to be helpful in taking the confidence that was created and developed in my first act and carrying it over into my next act and making it applicable there, and I know will serve me into whatever act I go into down the road. So, how does one take this physical performance identity crisis and turn it into something that can be useful and taken into your next act? I found two things to be helpful. Number one, self-awareness is a superpower. In my next act, I didn't have and still don't have hours and hours to go to the gym and work on basketball skills and work out for 2.5 hours and have it be part of my normal day. And so realizing those are the things that got me to the point I was at as a basketball player and strength and conditioning wise and athleticism wise, I have to adjust accordingly. I have to know that without putting in those hours and hours of work, whenever I do go and play or work out, it's going to be a reflection of the time that I've put in, just like it always was. And when I got over my ego a little bit, I was able to enjoy games a little bit more because I had tempered expectations for what I was going to be able to do. And I set physical goals for strength and speed and athleticism and all that would be more adjusted for the time that I had to put toward them in this next act that I'm currently in. Now, the expectations are still greater than normal. That was something that was kind of ingrained and developed into my mindset of growth and always pushing to be better. But they're at a level that will work for me in this new phase of life as I continue to push more in other areas that I was not previously able to do in my first act. Number two, don't throw away your first act. I know a lot of people that have had a bad experience with their sport or just get burnt out with it at the end and then they don't want anything to do with it after they're done. And I completely understand that. I get that. I have a lot of friends who had the same sort of case happen to them, and it sucks when that happens. However, I've found that when I'm able to get into the gym and shoot or play or do a mini dribbling workout or just go get some shots up once or twice a week, maybe a little bit more, it allows me to enjoy all of the little things about basketball that I fell in love with and made me love the sport so much and enjoy my career so much. Mentally, it's a great anchor that I had developed over the years as well, and it allows me to have that reset and just to go kind of get away from things when I need to. Another aspect of this is some people want to get back to the point or close to the point they were physically with the workouts and with their body that they were in their first act when they were playing. And they can be a little bit intimidated by all of the work that they know and have gone through before to get to that point. I say do the hard workouts. It doesn't have to be at the same level they used to be. You might not be at the same standard that you were, but by doing the hard workouts that you used to do, and I found that when I do all the hard workouts that I used to do, is you still get that same feeling of accomplishment and you still get into that headspace of pushing to someone better and toward a goal that you had been doing all your entire first act. And that is one of the things that you can carry forward into any next act that you go with. And then the more consistently you do them, the better you'll get at them, and the more those feelings of success and accomplishment will come back with it. And it's something that you already know how to do. So to sum things up, the adjustments of performance expectations you have for your body after you retire as an athlete sucks. Straight up, it just sucks. Both when you play your former sport and with the lifting and conditioning workouts that you do, because you likely aren't leading a lifestyle that allows you to put in the time and effort necessary to meet those former levels that you were once at. And that's okay. Encouraged even as you lean into your next acts and find your next acts outside of your sport or whatever your first act was. The first way to make that adjustment is to be self-aware. I fully advocate for still pushing the limits of yourself now to become and push toward the person that you need to be in order to reach the goals that you have in your next act. But by tempering the expectations that you're able to have as you push into that new phase of life into your next acts, it allows you to enjoy those things more and avoid pointless frustration that have not been earned. The second way to make that adjustment is to not throw away your first act. I've benefited immensely from not letting the bad experiences I had while playing basketball affect the joy I did and still get from it now. It also helps me to stay structured to meet those redefined feelings and benchmarks of success in this new phase of life that I'm living in this hotel, in my next act. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I have to say or think. It matters what you go out and actually do. If you know someone who should hear this, go ahead and share it with them. If you know someone who you think would be a great guest to have on the pod, let me know, and I'll try to make it happen. If you're listening this far, I appreciate you so much, and I'm very excited for this new year of 2023 and all the things that I've planned and, God willing, we'll be able to push out and give to you guys. But until then, let's make sure the best is still yet to come.